For many of us, water is a simple affair. We turn a tap and it flows, clean and seemingly endless. We flush a toilet and our waste disappears. It is an act so mundane, so ingrained in our daily rhythm, that we seldom give it a second thought. But this reality is a privilege, not a universal right. Globally, hundreds of millions of people live a starkly different life, one dictated by the relentless pursuit of water. The United Nations tells us that while a significant portion of the world's population has gained access to basic drinking water services, over 2 billion people still lack safely managed water. This is not just a statistic, it is a daily, grueling challenge that shapes every facet of existence for communities from the bustling, informal settlements of Nairobi to the flood-prone deltas of Bangladesh. The gap between the water haves and the water have-nots is a chasm of inequality. While one household might debate the merits of bottled versus filtered tap water, another is calculating the hours needed to walk to the nearest communal pump. They are weighing the cost of buying from a vendor against the risk of drinking from a contaminated stream. For these families, water is not a given, it is a precious and often precarious commodity. The struggle is a constant negotiation with time, money, and health. It is a burden that falls disproportionately on the shoulders of women and girls, who are often tasked with the back-breaking labor of fetching water, a chore that steals their time from education, from income-generating activities, and from childhood itself. In places like Bangladesh and Kenya, this struggle is etched into the very landscape and social fabric. These nations, though geographically and culturally distinct, share a common narrative of water insecurity. Their stories are not just about a lack of rainfall or infrastructure, they are complex tales of poverty, governance, and environmental change. In Bangladesh, a country blessed with abundant rivers, the threat often comes from having too much water of the wrong kind, salty, polluted, or arriving in catastrophic floods. In Kenya, the challenge is frequently one of scarcity, where prolonged droughts parch the land and turn rivers into dusty roads, forcing people and livestock into desperate competition for dwindling resources. Understanding this global water crisis requires us to move beyond abstract numbers and into the lived realities of the people at its epicenter. It means acknowledging that access to water is not simply a technical problem to be solved with pipes and pumps. It is a deeply human issue intertwined with social justice, economic opportunity, and fundamental dignity. The daily quest for water is a relentless cycle that traps families in poverty, compromises their health, and limits their aspirations for a better future. For billions, the simple act of getting a clean drink of water is the first and most formidable hurdle of every single day, a challenge that the rest of us have the luxury of forgetting. Imagine waking up not to the sound of an alarm clock, but to a pressing internal calculation. For someone like Halima, in a coastal village in Bangladesh, the first thought of the day is about water. Is the rainwater tank nearly empty? Will the saline contamination in the nearby pond be worse today after the high tide? How much time will she have to spend walking to the neighbor's house, who has a deeper, less salty well, to beg for a few liters for cooking? Her entire day is structured around these questions. Every decision, from what she will cook for her family, to whether her children will be on time for school, hinges on the availability and quality of water. This is not a hypothetical scenario. It is the lived experience for millions. In an informal settlement on the outskirts of Nairobi, Kenya, a man named Joseph faces a different but equally stressful set of calculations. The municipal water pipes in his neighborhood are often dry, a phenomenon locals call water rationing. His options are limited and costly. He can queue for hours at a communal water kiosk, where the supply is intermittent and the lines are long and sometimes tense. Or he can buy water from a private vendor, a man with a handcart laden with yellow jerry cans who charges a premium for the convenience. This price can be 10 times what wealthier residents in formal suburbs pay for piped water, consuming a significant portion of Joseph's meager daily earnings and forcing him to choose between water and other essentials like food or medicine. The daily struggle is a constant source of anxiety and physical toil. It is a ledger of trade-offs. For Halima, using the contaminated pond water for washing clothes might save her a 2-hour walk, but it could also lead to painful skin rashes for her children. For Joseph, skipping a day of buying water means his family cannot bathe, and the risk of disease from poor hygiene increases. These are not choices made lightly, they are desperate calculations made in the face of systemic failure. The physical burden is immense. with women and girls often carrying containers weighing up to 20 kilograms over long distances, leading to chronic back and neck problems. This is the unseen, physical cost of water insecurity. This daily grind reveals how deeply water is woven into the fabric of life. It is about more than just hydration. It is about health, because contaminated water is a primary source of cholera, typhoid, and diarrheal diseases. It is about dignity, because the lack of water for personal hygiene is a source of shame and social exclusion. It is about economic survival, as time spent fetching water is time not spent earning an income or tending to a farm. For Halima and Joseph, and countless others like them, water is the central character in their daily drama, a force that dictates their movements, drains their resources, and shapes their very hopes for a better tomorrow. The delicate balance of securing water is easily shattered when nature's cycles become unpredictable and extreme. In Kenya, this often manifests as drought. When the rains fail, season after season, the consequences are devastating. The lush savannas turn to brittle, dusty plains, rivers shrink to trickles and then disappear altogether, leaving cracked earth in their wake. For pastoralist communities who depend on their livestock, a drought is an existential threat. Cattle, their primary source of wealth and sustenance, grow weak and die. Tensions flare as different communities are forced to compete for the few remaining water sources, sometimes leading to violent conflict over grazing rights and access to wells that have been used peacefully for generations. In Bangladesh, the challenge is often the opposite, an overabundance of water. As a low-lying delta nation, it is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to climate change. Cyclones, powered by a warming Bay of Bengal, are becoming more frequent and intense, bringing catastrophic storm surges that inundate coastal areas. These floods do not just destroy homes and crops, they contaminate freshwater sources on a massive scale. Saline seawater intrudes deep inland, poisoning the shallow ponds and wells that millions rely on for drinking and irrigation. The water that surrounds them becomes a source of peril, rendering their fields barren and their drinking water unsafe for months or even years. Beyond these dramatic events of drought and flood, a more insidious threat is silently poisoning water supplies: pollution. In the crowded urban centers of both countries, industrial waste and untreated sewage often flow directly into the rivers that serve as lifelines for downstream communities. Factories release heavy metals and toxic chemicals without consequence, while informal settlements, lacking proper sanitation systems, contribute to a high concentration of pathogens in the water. In rural Bangladesh, the green revolution that increased crop yields also introduced a reliance on chemical fertilizers and pesticides, which have leached into the groundwater, adding another layer of contamination to the existing problem of natural arsenic. These environmental pressures do not exist in a vacuum. They are amplified by broken and inadequate water systems. A well-maintained piped network could offer resilience against a drought, and a properly managed purification plant could treat polluted river water. But in many regions, the infrastructure is old, crumbling, or simply non-existent. A community hand pump, often the only source of clean water for hundreds of people, can remain broken for weeks or months, awaiting a spare part or a mechanic that the local government cannot afford to provide. The convergence of environmental degradation and infrastructural neglect creates a perfect storm, leaving the most vulnerable populations trapped in a cycle of water insecurity that is becoming harder to escape with each passing year. To truly understand the complex web of decisions that people face, researchers needed to move beyond broad surveys and statistics. This led to the creation of the Water Diaries project, which was, honestly, an innovative study that sought to capture the granular, day-to-day reality of water insecurity. Conducted in 24 sites across Kenya, Ethiopia, and Bangladesh, the project involved asking participants to keep a detailed record of their water-related activities over a year. They logged every source they used, how much water they collected, how much time it took, what they paid for it, and how they used each drop. This meticulous approach provided an unprecedented high-resolution picture of real-life choices and coping strategies. The diaries revealed a startling complexity that was previously invisible to policymakers. Researchers discovered that households do not rely on a single water source. Instead, they manage a water portfolio, much like a financial manager diversifies investments. For example, a family might use rainwater collected from their roof for drinking, water from a communal well for cooking, and water from a more polluted river for washing clothes or for their livestock. This strategy, known as source switching, is a way of balancing the competing factors of cost, time, quality, and reliability. The diaries showed that these choices were dynamic, changing daily or weekly based on weather, income, and the functionality of different sources. One of the most profound findings from the Water Diaries was the stark difference in experience between wealthier and poorer households, even within the same community. Better-off families could afford to invest in larger rainwater harvesting tanks, giving them a reliable buffer during the dry season. They could pay for private water connections or afford the higher prices charged by vendors when communal sources failed. Poorer households, in contrast, were disproportionately reliant on unreliable, distant or contaminated free sources. When these failed, they had little choice but to buy water at exorbitant rates, go without, or risk their health by using unsafe alternatives. The diaries quantified this inequality in stark terms, showing how poverty directly translates into greater time burdens, higher financial costs, and increased health risks. Furthermore, the project laid bare the central role of women and girls. The diaries, often kept by the female heads of households, meticulously documented the hours they spent walking, queuing, and carrying water. This data provided powerful evidence of the immense opportunity cost of water insecurity. It showed how this daily, unpaid labor prevents women from engaging in paid work, limits girls' attendance at school, and perpetuates cycles of gender inequality. The Water Diaries moved the conversation from anecdotal evidence to hard data, proving that the struggle for water is not just an infrastructure problem, but a profound social and gender justice issue that demands a more nuanced and people-centered approach. The daily struggle for water is not merely a consequence of dry weather or broken pumps. It is deeply embedded in a hidden architecture of history, politics, and power. The challenges faced by communities in Kenya and Bangladesh today have roots that stretch back to colonial-era policies which often prioritized water infrastructure for commercial agriculture and administrative centers, while neglecting the needs of rural and indigenous populations. These historical patterns of investment and neglect created a foundation of inequality that persists to this day, shaping who has access to reliable water systems and who is left to fend for themselves with inadequate, community-managed solutions. This legacy is compounded by modern-day governance failures. In many urban areas, the formal water utility serves only the planned, wealthier parts of the city. The sprawling informal settlements, home to a huge portion of the urban population, are often left in a legal gray area, unrecognized by the municipality and therefore unserved by its infrastructure. This void is filled by informal networks of water vendors and cartels, which operate outside of government regulation. While they provide a vital service, they often do so at exploitative prices and with no guarantee of water quality. The state's failure to extend services creates and sustains a parallel market where water becomes a commodity controlled by powerful private interests. Community-led systems, often heralded as a sustainable solution, also reveal the complexities of power and governance. In many rural areas, communities are given responsibility for maintaining their own water points, like a village well or hand pump. While this can foster a sense of ownership, these systems often falter without external support. A simple breakdown can become a major crisis if the community lacks the funds for a spare part or the technical expertise for a repair. Furthermore, management committees can be dominated by local elites, leading to decisions that benefit the powerful at the expense of the marginalized. Who gets to be on the water committee and how tariffs are set are deeply political questions that determine who truly benefits from the resource. Poverty and gender intersect with these political and historical factors to create layers of disadvantage. Within a single community, a woman from a marginalized ethnic group may face far greater barriers to accessing water than a man from a dominant clan. She may be last in line at the communal tap or excluded from meetings where decisions about water management are made. Her voice goes unheard, and her specific needs, for instance for water for menstrual hygiene, are ignored. Understanding water insecurity, therefore, requires us to look beyond the physical landscape and examine this invisible architecture of power, history, and culture that dictates who gets water, when, and on what terms. For too long, the response to water insecurity has been driven by top-down, engineering-focused solutions. Large-scale projects are designed in distant capital cities with little input from the people they are meant to serve. The result is often a landscape littered with well-intentioned but failed infrastructure, solar pumps with no one trained to fix them, purification plants that communities cannot afford to operate, and piped systems that bypass the poorest households. The fundamental flaw in this approach is its failure to listen. It treats people as passive recipients of aid, rather than as experts in their own lives, who possess invaluable knowledge about their environment and their needs. However, a shift is beginning to happen. There is a growing recognition that sustainable solutions must be co-created with communities. Promising pilot programs are emerging that embrace this philosophy. In some Kenyan counties, new governance models are bringing together local government officials, private vendors, and community representatives to jointly manage water resources, creating accountability and transparency. In coastal Bangladesh, some NGOs are working with villagers to design and build hybrid rainwater harvesting systems that are better adapted to the local saline environment, using materials that are affordable and easily sourced. These solutions work because they are tailored to the specific context and built on local knowledge. The insights from projects like the Water Diaries are crucial to this new approach. By illuminating the complex coping strategies people already use, such as managing a portfolio of different water sources, they provide a blueprint for how interventions can support and enhance these existing systems rather than trying to replace them. For instance, instead of focusing only on a single perfect source, support could be directed towards improving the quality of a secondary source used for hygiene, or providing subsidies that make vendor water more affordable during a drought. This nuanced approach acknowledges the reality on the ground and works with it, not against it. Ultimately, solving the global water crisis requires a profound change in mindset. We must move beyond the arrogance of assuming we have all the answers and embrace the humility of listening. The voices of Halima, Joseph, and the millions of others living on the front lines of water insecurity are not just stories of suffering. They are chronicles of resilience, ingenuity, and deep practical wisdom. They are the true experts. If we are to build a more water-secure future, our most important task is to listen to them, to learn from their experiences, and to empower them to be the architects of their own solutions. Their knowledge is the most precious resource we have.